Welcome to Hamburgers and Horror, the home of meat, monsters, and memorials to one of the greatest directors to ever do it. I'm Noah Hook, and today we're looking at Eraserhead.
In heaven, everything is fine. In heaven, everything is fine. In heaven, everything is fine. You got your good things, and I've got mine.
This 1977 surrealist body horror follows a man named Henry living in a bleak apartment surrounded by industrial gloom. When he discovers that an earlier fling with his ex-girlfriend Mary left her pregnant, he marries the expectant mother and has her move in with him. It's not quite the American dream though, as their child is a slimy dinosaur-looking thing that won't stop crying. Henry's newfound fatherhood causes him to spiral into madness as he encounters a seductress across the hall, a woman living in his radiator, and a man seemingly controlling everything from inside a tiny planet. Eraserhead was written and directed by the one and only David Lynch in his feature-length debut. Lynch was a filmmaker, visual artist, musician, and actor known for his surreal, dreamy, often violent projects. His films are truly in a league of their own, so much so that the term Lynchian has been used to describe any project that's been influenced by his own. Just a handful of his weird and wonderful works include The Elephant Man, Dune, Blue Velvet, Mulholland Drive, Inland Empire, and Twin Peaks. But I definitely suggest going to his Wikipedia to see the hundreds of things he's created. Sadly, David Lynch passed earlier in 2025 and he'll be sorely missed, but I think I speak for everyone when I say I'm grateful for the incredible life and career that he's built over these past decades. Lynch went to school to study as a painter, during which he created a few short animated films to bring his images to life. He dropped out of painting school to pursue filmmaking, receiving a scholarship at the American Film Institute. Lynch presented the script for Eraserhead, which some AFI board members were opposed to due to its surrealist nature, but apparently the dean of the school loved it so much he threatened to resign if it was vetoed. Lynch was inspired by Kafka's The Metamorphosis and Gogol's The Nose while writing the screenplay, bringing in themes of alienation, isolation, vanity, class, and absurdity. The script is also thought to be based on Lynch's own fears of fatherhood, as his own newborn daughter Jennifer was born while writing it, and she did have some health issues at the time. He based the environment and tone of the film on 5 childhood years he spent in Philadelphia, where they lived in a rough, low-income neighborhood. Initial casting began in 1971, and based on the 20-page screenplay that Lynch presented, AFI thought that at most it would take a year to make this thing. But they had no clue some seemingly simple scenes and lines would be quite extended, and that Lynch would prove to be insanely meticulous. Production ultimately took 5 years, with most of the cast and crew financially pitching in to help the project happen. Eraserhead stars Jack Nance, who'd go on to act in a ton of Lynch films, as well as The Blob and Ghoulies, as first-time father Henry Spencer. Charlotte Stewart from Twin Peaks, Tremors, and Slums of Beverly Hills as Henry's estranged girlfriend Mary X. Alan Joseph from Raging Bull and Saturday the 14th as Mary's father, Mr. X. And Jeanne Bates from Mulholland Drive and Silent Night Deadly Night 4 as Mrs. X. Lynch also served as the film's primary producer, editor, production designer, and art director, so he really had a hand in every single part of making this film. Due to the 5-year schedule, cinematography was split between Herbert Cardwell and Frederick Elms, the latter of whom would later work on Patterson and Brothers. Elms also helped craft effects like the baby and the radiator woman's facial prosthetics. The physical effects used to create the deformed child have been kept a secret. It's been speculated that the prop may have been constructed from a skinned rabbit or lamb fetus, which both are fucking insane options, but it's one secret that Lynch took to the grave. The film's intense sound design was created by Lynch and Alan Splett, who worked on films like Dead Poets Society, Blue Velvet, and Dirty Rotten Scoundrels. The soundtrack is densely layered, including as many as 15 different sounds played simultaneously. Eraserhead premiered in 1977 in Los Angeles, and it continued to find a home as a midnight movie for years after. It ultimately grossed $7 million at the box office, so on a budget of $100,000, it was kind of a booming success. It was met with mixed reviews from critics though, some of whom found it to be in bad taste, poorly made, or outright pretentious. Others found great value in it though, describing it as intensely personal and a pure radical piece of dreamlike surrealism. It currently holds an 85 and 82% on Rotten Tomatoes, along with a 3.9 on Letterboxd, so appreciation for the film has only built through the years. It's gone on to have a huge influence on the genre, inspiring films like Begotten, Pi, Tetsuo the Iron Man, and even The Shining. Kubrick played this on set to get his cast in the right fucked up headspace. This was just the beginning of Lynch's career, and there are so many aspects of it he'd continue to perfect or expand on in later works. But this is right up there as one of my favorite films by him. It is such a pure vision, unaffected by the rules and expectations of big budget filmmaking. It's about as DIY as it gets, and I always love to see what young creative people are able to scrape together with a lot of time, a little bit of money, and an extra ton of effort. Thank you so much to my patron Ben Bishop for requesting Eraserhead for me to review. I'm genuinely so excited to take this time to talk about David Lynch and Eraserhead specifically. But hey, with all of that said, it's probably time we get started. You might want to put your kids away for this one, folks, because we're watching Eraserhead. The movie opens on a sideways Henry Spencer bouncing around the screen, which is superimposed over a lonely planet in the depths of space. Beneath its rocky surface lives this lumpy man in his home. Henry's mouth gapes open as a giant sperm emerges, and the man in the planet pulls some levers as the creature swims away into a body of liquid. We emerge through a bright white hole through the darkness where we rejoin Henry. He putzes through a dystopic industrial landscape filled with pipes, chain link fences, and steel drums on his way back to his apartment building. He hops aboard the slow-ass elevator to his floor. A beautiful woman who lives across the hall from Henry informs him that his ex-girlfriend Mary called the lobby's payphone and that she's invited him to dinner with her parents. Henry throws on some jazz and dries his wet sock on his ominous radiator. He also plops some coins into his drawer pot while looking at a torn photo of Mary. We're just not gonna address the giant pile of dirt on the dresser, huh? He makes his way over to Mary's place, which is right next to some train tracks and some giant exhaust pipes. It seems Mary's been AWOL lately, so he's surprised she's even reached out. Henry is introduced to Mary's mother, and we learn that he used to work at a local factory as a printer, but was recently laid off. Mary has some kind of spasm that her mother quells, and Mr. X pops in to share how excited he is about Cornish hens. He's a plumber that's lived here for 30 years, and he's watched this town shift from farmland to the industrial hellhole it is now. The X family prepares dinner, making sure lazy-ass grandma participates. Hey, at least she gets a ciggy for her efforts. Bill shares that an arm injury caused him to lose all feeling in it, so he asks Henry to carve up the tiny chicken.
Do I just, Just cut them up like regular chickens?
Sure, just cut them up like regular chickens.
The little bird oozes blood as Mrs. X starts speaking in tongues, which seems to kill the vibe a bit. Mama returns and asks for a minute alone with Henry, where she asks if he's had sexual intercourse with her daughter. Mrs. X don't beat around the bush. She kisses him on the neck before revealing that Mary's given birth to a baby. Apparently it's very premature, but she expects him to wed her daughter and help her raise it. All this stress gives my boy Henry a nosebleed. But yeah, next thing you know, Mary has moved into his apartment with their monstrous infant whose bulbous head and long neck resembles the giant sperm from the beginning. Its constant crying and refusal to eat immediately frustrates Mary. Henry finds a tiny package in his mailbox. What is that, a chili pepper? A dried up shrimp? I think it's actually a worm. He lies about receiving any mail, and while staring at his radiator, he briefly witnesses a tiny stage inside of it light up. That night, he places the worm in one of his cabinets for safekeeping. Fellas, don't let your wives know about your worms, just keep them a secret. They both lie awake as thunder claps and the baby cries, and Mary eventually snaps and screams for it to shut up. It doesn't help. She packs a bag and claims to go back to her parents for a decent night's sleep. Henry attempts to care for the child, only to find it struggling to breathe and covered in sores.
Oh, you are sick.
He sets Lil Dude up with a humidifier, which is actually super cute, and then he checks on his worm, but whenever he tries to leave, the baby starts crying. That night, Henry has another vision inside the radiator, where a deformed woman living inside it puts on a little song and dance as those spermy worm things drop from above. She curb stomps a couple of the creatures before descending back into the dark. Mary does return home the next night, but based on her endless squirming, I don't think Henry's really happy about it. He realizes she's giving birth to a bunch of those worms and yeets them against the wall. Henry's a one and done kind of parent, I guess. But the tiny worm that he's been keeping doesn't seem to appreciate that. He receives a late night visit from the woman across the hall who accidentally locked herself out. Right. He's confused to see that Mary has seemingly left again, and as a friendly neighbor, he's happy to let her stay the night. The baby cries as they get it on inside a murky pool of liquid. She seems to glimpse the desolate planet as the radiator woman sings In Heaven, a song that Lynch and Ivers wrote for the film. Henry joins her on stage, and their touch causes a white flash before she vanishes. He glimpses the man inside the planet as a big version of his dead bedside tree rolls in. It begins to bleed as his head pops off and rolls across the floor. The baby's head begins to emerge from where his was severed and screams for a good long while. His head plummets down to the concrete below, and some poor little boy brings it to the local pencil factory. He and the owner bring it down to some kind of machine that's able to turn his brain matter into erasers. It passes the notebook check, and the little boy gets paid, and Henry's eraser shavings get brushed off into the air. He wakes from this nightmare to witness a mugging outside, but instead of helping, he goes across the hall to see his little dream boo thing. Unfortunately, she's about to get it on with this guy that kind of resembles my big toe. This leaves poor Henry shook. He grabs a pair of scissors and cuts open the baby's swaddling clothes, only to learn that it was born without skin and the wraps were the only thing keeping its organs from spilling out. The poor little thing hyperventilates before Henry shanks it in the heart and it starts coughing up blood. But then its opened wound starts spewing out what looks like grits before the baby grows to a gigantic size. The power goes out as Henry and his eraser shavings watch the planet crack open. The man inside is struggling with his sparking levers, and Henry is embraced by the radiator woman to end the movie. And that's Eraserhead. Yeah, I love this one. It's obviously not the typical horror movie experience. It's not out to get you with jump scares. There's really slow paced, and the closest thing to a true antagonist is the protagonist's own baby. So it's not out to scare you in the traditional sense, but that doesn't make Eraserhead any less unsettling or outright scary at times. My absolute favorite element of Eraserhead is also the one that my kind of review just isn't going to be able to showcase well, and that's the film's sound design. There is almost always a constant hum or buzz in the background, as if there is always a machine or mechanical process happening just outside a window or behind a door. And that's just during the film's most quiet moments. During actual sequences of intensity, there could be up to 15 different sounds that are building off each other to create an impenetrable wall of hums, bangs, vibrations, cries, and screams. And this is paired really well with the black and white cinematography. The lack of color gives us a bit less to visually take in, so we're able to absorb the sound with less distraction. But there is also some really great set design and location building. You still get that feeling of rust and grime on every single surface. The dramatic use of light allows for a lot of deep blacks and rich midtones, which slimy elements like the baby's skin contrast with really nicely. I can see Eraserhead's influence on a lot of films and subgenres, but none more so than Tetsuo the Iron Man and the Japanese cyberpunk movement of the 90s. These films also have a great use of a technique called musique concrète, meaning that a lot of the soundtrack utilize non-musical sounds as the building blocks for its soundscapes. This was also the beginning of Lynch using diegetic music in his dream sequences, like the woman in the radiator singing to Henry in his mind. He would continue to play with this in Twin Peaks and Blue Velvet and a few other films. At the beginning, I mentioned this could be seen as a metaphor for Lynch's own fears of fatherhood. While he was writing the script, his daughter Jennifer was born with what Lynch has described as a severely clubbed foot, which required a lot of surgeries to fix. Jennifer has straight up said that her own unexpected conception and birth defects were the basis for the film's themes. That's a lot for a kid to process. So you could interpret this to be a genuine story about a monster baby in a post-apocalyptic world, but most people consider the world that Henry experiences to be a creation of his own mind. You can imagine that Henry Spencer's own fear and sleep deprivation has caused him to recess deep into his own paranoia and hallucinations. So Henry's neighborhood isn't actually a toxic, mechanical wasteland, but it probably is a rough inner city neighborhood near an industrial park. Mary's family probably aren't insane and serving bleeding, squirming chickens, but they are probably immigrants who speak a different language and eat foods that feel alien to Henry. His newborn baby isn't actually an alien sperm monster, it's probably a regular baby, maybe with some kind of health issues, but a regular human baby nonetheless. But in the scared, inexperienced eyes of Henry, the baby might as well be an alien. He has no idea how to care for it as it spends all day every day crying away, and this screaming, dying creature begins to consume his life. He lost his job, so he has no reason to leave his apartment, and he fantasizes about his beautiful neighbor across the hall due to his loveless marriage. The radiator seems to be an object he likes to focus on when the real world becomes too much, pretending it's a secret world inside of there that he can go and escape to. When the woman performs in heaven, it becomes even more clear that Henry is having suicidal thoughts. She's almost like a siren calling for him to join her in death, as well as urging him to kill his own child. The planet we occasionally see is a symbol for Henry's brain, and the man pulling the levers inside represents his fear and anxiety around fatherhood and sexuality plaguing his mind. Because despite somehow making a baby, Henry seems absolutely terrified by sex. This is why the baby looks like a giant sperm, and why those creatures appear throughout various dreams and hallucinations. He's titillated and terrified by the woman next door, imagining her as a dangerous seductress hoping to get her paws on him. We are experiencing the world through the eyes, ears, and brain of a very scared, troubled person, which makes the world around us a very scary and troubling place. Henry is an incredibly passive figure. He's essentially just wandering through the world and experiencing whatever gets thrown at him next. It could be assumed that the opening scene is where he impregnates Mary, and it seems like he was probably just laying there in shock while it happened. He's not excited or interested in being a father, and he clearly has no love or real affection for Mary, but he does wed her and let her move in with the baby because that's what's expected of him. I think of the man and the planet as Henry simply going through the motions in life. It's his brain simply accepting and adjusting to his new circumstances, but in the end, Henry is finally making a decision for himself. The decision to end the life of himself and his child is the kind of thing that goes against the base survival instincts hardwired within us. It's a violent, self-destructive thing that requires a metaphorical glitch in the system or technological meltdown in that hard drive. But in a world where you have zero control, passion, or future, perhaps deciding to erase it all and see what's beyond is the only real decision to make. All in all, Eraserhead is a very unique viewing experience. It is atmospheric as all hell. It's a movie you experience bodily more than you take in narratively or mentally. It almost feels like a spiritual experience. It's a combination of brutal sound design, sharp cinematography and set design, and bizarre visuals that range from uncanny to outright nightmarish. It's a film about fear and alienation, and it does everything in its power to put you in the place of Henry as he struggles through the abstract and abject horror of everyday life. If you've never seen Eraserhead, do yourself a favor and give it a watch. It could function either as a great intro to his work, or if you know a lot of his other films, it'll be great to see where he got his start. It's a film that I personally love. I saw it at some point when I was in college in art school, and it definitely had a profound effect on me. It was a great example to me of doing a lot with a little, what you could do in art school despite not having a big budget to work with and just your own creative aspirations. If you're hoping to make a weird fucking movie one day, take a look at Eraserhead. Maybe it'll get some ideas rolling. Well, that's about it. Thank you again to my patron Ben for requesting Eraserhead for me to review. It's been really lovely just getting to research David Lynch and his iconic first film, and being able to pay tribute to him on the channel like this was really nice. But what did y'all think of Eraserhead, and what is your favorite movie from David Lynch? Let me know down below. I've actually never watched Twin Peaks before. It's been on my watch list for years now, and I have a couple friends who absolutely love it, so I've been meaning to and probably will soon, but let me know if you think I should go for it. And be sure to join me in 2 weeks as we get back to the Texas Chainsaw Massacre with a 2006 film, The Beginning. Well, that's about it. Thank you all so much for joining me, and an extra thank you to my patrons. As always, I'm Noah Hook, and thanks for watching Hamburgers and Horror. Stay safe out there. Thanks for watching my review of Eraserhead. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to like and subscribe so you can keep up with all my horror reviews. And if you want to help support the channel further, you should check out my Patreon account. You'll be able to vote for future movies and franchises I cover on the channel. Thanks y'all.